Good afternoon, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. This is episode 73, and we're joined by a repeat guest. You all probably remember him if you followed the forum very carefully from the first season, episode 9. Dr. Jared Ball is with us again today, and he's a professor of communication studies at Morgan State University. He's a co-founder of Black Power Media. Black Power Media is a great resource for people. You have Dr. Jared Ball, you have Kim Brown, you have Ear Doctor, you have Jackie Luckman, Kamal Franklin, Kalonji Chunga. So I urge my audience to check out Black Power Media, especially the YouTube channel. That's why I go to a lot. And Jared Ball has his own website, imixwhatilike.org. And so we just want to say thank you, and we appreciate your acceptance of our invitation again.
No, it's an honor, and I greatly appreciate the invitation. So thanks for having me.
Yes, the first episode 9, I encourage my audience to go back and listen to that so we don't have to play catch up with a lot of what we're going to be discussing today, because today is a continuation of his book that he published originally, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. We're going to talk about the second edition that was released this year. And there's a subtitle, I think, is Media, Race, and Economics. But there is a slight difference from the first edition, which we will talk about in a second. But I wanted to get a slight add in and say we appreciate everyone that subscribes to Kiko's Freethinkers Forum on our YouTube channel, especially. We've reached 93 different countries. We've reached all 50 states in a little bit over a year. And this is despite the heavy suppression that we're getting from the algorithm, from just general opinion, because a lot of the stuff that we do here at Kiko's Freethinkers Forum overlaps some of what Jared does on his platform too at Black Power Media, because we're really talking from outside of what you would consider the traditional talking points. We do it a completely different way. And so in saying that, I want my audience to support independent media. I'm not asking for a dime. I'm simply asking to subscribe to the channel for free. We're not going to put you behind a paywall or anything, and simply open yourself up to different perspectives. That's all we want to really do here at the forum, and support independent media. And I think that can go a long way into maybe breaking down some of these lines of communication. But saying that, we have to deal with the propaganda, unfortunately. And I want to open up my question that doesn't pertain to the book, but just the overall issue that I see. And I think Dr. Ball will be the perfect person to ask this question. Why should the average Black person, for instance, in the country, in the world, have any interest in what's happening in the Palestine situation right now, the Gaza destruction right now? Why should people have that sort of thought towards it? Because I think it kind of goes into what you're saying in your book.
Well, that's interesting. I'd be interested. So I'm happy to hear what connections to my book you might see in terms of an argument for framing or analysis of what's happening in Palestine. My initial thought about it, in terms of answering your question, would be that, one, Black people here in the United States are part of a global population. They're part of a global African diaspora, and they're part of a world human society. So the idea that Black people shouldn't be concerned or interested in anything involving global or international politics, I would want to challenge that. And then from there, we could start to draw more direct parallels. There is a long history of Black liberation movements being in solidarity with Palestine, as being critical of the Zionist project in Israel and its colonization of Palestinians, and that is the state of Israel's interaction with the broader African diaspora, which has itself been hostile and deserves its own separate conversation, the interaction between Israel and South Africa and apartheid, where Israel supported apartheid to the end, Israel's relationship to Uganda and other. So there's a lot that could be said that should bring, I would think, Black people in the United States into some interest in terms of what's going on. There is also some of the more direct relationships, similar to what Dr. King once said of Vietnam, that the bombs you drop overseas explode at home. That is, the billions that are being used to fund and support the state of Israel could, at least theoretically, be redistributed to support the ongoing horrific lived experience of Black people and the material conditions suffered here in the United States. We're constantly told there's no money to improve housing, healthcare, education, food, employment, etc. Well, one place we might want to consider starting is as the United States. It's would be redistributing the billions that go to Israel back to Black people here in the United States and perhaps others. And then there is sort of there. Then I'll just stop here. But there's also a similarity in politics. Well, actually, maybe two things quickly. There's a similarity in politics between the relationship between Israel and Palestinians and the state of the United States and Black America, which some of us still contend should be best understood as an internal colony here in the United States. And there are parallels between the attempts to manipulate politics and resources, et cetera, between the state and the oppressor and the dominant society, Israel and the United States, vis-a-vis Black people and Palestinians. And then lastly, to maybe where there's a connection to my work that you might be pointing to is the overwhelming propaganda used by the state of Israel to defend its position in the world, even as state policy. It's acknowledged policy, for instance, for Israel to use the claim of anti-Semitism to blunt criticism of Zionism and the oppression of Palestinians. So I'll stop there, but maybe that's where you might want to pick up, and I'm happy to hear where you think you see those connections as well.
I appreciate it. What we do on here is try to draw these connections. And I think a lot of what we talked about with the episode with Matthew Witt kind of points to this. A couple of episodes ago, Professor Witt from the University of Laverne in California, where these events are connected. And you don't have to be a conspiratorial person to see that these world events have connections to each other. And there are people who are benefiting from those disasters and catastrophes. I mean, this is a clear example of the military industrial complex to me. They're not even talking about the Ukraine-Russia stuff now, but look at who's controlling like the communication lines. I mean, they're telling you now, okay, this has got to be the main focus now, even though we're funneling all that money to the project in Ukraine to a dead end, as far as I'm concerned. That means just more people dying. And these people who claim to care for the environment, well, we know that the military is the #1 destructor of the environment. So how much are you actually interested in peace and interested in environmental conservation or whatever it may be? But the biggest connection I think I saw just reading your book is the mentality of people, the ability to be manipulated easily just at the stop of a dime. You talk about people like a Morris Stoudemire, who was a basketball player, former NBA player. Is this figureheadization, is what I call it, of people. We look up to these people as leaders, and I'm saying to myself, they may have come from poverty at one point, but you can't see yourself through a person who has their own interest or whatever. You still have to be your own person. And I think celeb culture has really destroyed a lot of this potential for people to develop free thinking minds, independent minds, just in general. But I see the propaganda used because it's almost like they tell you in so many ways, if you're Black, you have to look up to these people, these symbols, which kind of goes into the whole ad revenue thing. So even though you have the Black people who are running the channels, they're still being funded by the ad revenue people who don't have those same interests necessarily. So you're capturing audiences, and you can say that, oh, it's Black people, but who is it really benefiting at the end of the day monetarily? Who's it benefiting politically? Who is it benefiting? And also, there's almost an innocence, almost a naivete when it comes to a lot of the Black people that I talk to that still support this red, blue, two-party system stuff. And so an issue like Israel, which is clearly a position where both parties completely agree with the Israel position, and you have all this money that's given to these corporations to promote the Israel position. And so if you speak out at all against that position, you're automatically ostracized. And so I see a lot of the blacks who would normally want to say something, but they don't want to risk losing their careers, risk losing all that they maybe have because they don't want to take a chance on, putting their neck on the line when it comes to an issue like Palestine. Instead of just simply saying this is a colonialist project, and you can see it even with the Homestead Act. Derek Hamilton talked about it in the foreword of the book. He talked about the Homestead Acts. He talked about the New Deal agreements that didn't benefit Black people during the New Deal on the FDR. And you have a situation here in 1948 where you had Western governments basically, due to the atrocities that happened to the Jews in the Holocaust, they has been a project that's only expanded over time. And who has been at the mercy of this expansion? The Palestinians have. And now it's like the media is drawing these things, Arabs versus Jews, you need to pick a side. And so I think it's a propaganda that plays on Black people, especially because you had 2020, the Black Lives Matter, and it's during an election year. And so you have this same almost, I think it's a pretty similar context where the media is basically making it a binary where you're the enemy if you choose the side that's against us, and you're basically on your own if you decide to support the Palestinians. And you already see it where we're basically marginalized already, and it's clear where the powers to be, where their minds are, and we're kind of just put to the side. And if you drive that propaganda enough into people, it makes them question, gosh, all these people that I love, they support Israel. Why come I'm not supporting Israel? And I see a lot of that happening with the Black commentators and just Black people that I talk to. And a lot of them are just too scared to even have a view about it in the first place.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Was there a particular question you wanted me to?
No, I was simply just kind of responding, just speaking out
Mhm.
loud, just trying to think these things through. In a broader lens. I mean, this is not a new thing. I know you know that this is not a new technique that's been used, and
Mhm.
it's just unfortunate that so many audiences have been captured in the moment, and it seems like we lose the sight of principles. It shouldn't be. It should be as simple as saying this is completely wrong. We're funding money to Israel. We see who's aggressive. We see who's doing all the bombing. I mean, it's absolutely insane that we're even talking about this. We're
Yeah.
comparing people without the weapons with people who have the funding from all the high military artillery. I just don't know how people can't see through this propaganda.
Well, that's where I'm a little um maybe relative to you forgiving in the sense that and maybe that's not the right word, but at least I can perfectly understand why people are confused around these issues. And I'm more in the opposite. I'm more impressed when there is so much, particularly within the United States, criticism of dominant narratives of any kind. Because in particular with this one, whether it's starting with really a base layer of religious mythology on all sides that justifies people's positions and beliefs and all of this. And then you add on top of that, so you people are already entering this conversation from my perspective completely confused because they're entering on the basis of Judaism, Christianity, or Islam,
Mm-hmm.
or some variation thereof. And I think all of those as bases for an understanding of history or understanding contemporary politics is flawed at best. So from there, we get added on to that again, endless waves of propaganda that have been meant to defend the state of Israel and its existence, that has been meant to demean Arabs and Muslims specifically. Uh, uh, and I mean that in a two-pronged approach, that on the one hand, there is a very aggressive endeavor to present Israel as being justified in its existence and necessary and on its own, independent of any condemnation of anyone else, justified in a value. On the other end, there is an equally aggressive condemnation of Arabs and Muslims that goes back just as long in terms of condemning their humanity, religion, et cetera, and so forth. So when you put all of that together and then add on to it any other array of problems, including military and advertising control of U.S. media and news, framing for many people in the United States a view of the world that is entirely flawed and upside down and backwards, to being distracted and never paying much attention to these issues in general, to levels of ignorance through public education and private education. There's so much that goes into this. So by the time we get to today's messaging of Hamas bad, Israel good, I'm shocked if almost anyone, particularly again within the United States, the most heavily propagandized population in human history, if anyone comes out of this with critical thought, I'm shocked and amazed, impressed, and wanting to help build and organize with them. So, yeah.
I get what you're saying, though, and it actually goes to something you said in the first episode, episode 9, where I asked you a question about why hasn't Black Power media exploded and just gotten more and more and more support, just from viewers and stuff. And you say you're surprised to the extent that you even have an audience. And so that makes total sense, what you're saying. It does. It's just maybe it is a little bit emotional where I'm coming from. But I feel like we have so much access to stuff now. I mean, I know that there is propaganda, but at the same time, we have access to so much, information. But I think it may be also a case where we're also so discouraged to be separate from other people. These issues are so divisive to the point where people in their own families aren't even talking to each other. Your own friends, your neighbors aren't even talking to each other. And like I said, it's almost like it was the last political election cycle where there were complete sections of people that wouldn't even talk to me because of my view on the issue. And I feel like they're doing the same thing with this. And so maybe that is something that I need to consider, that if people are even willing to think critically at all, then that's a positive.
Well, they're not encouraged to. I mean, in fact, the opposite. And part of the problem is to what you said is when you say there's so much information out there. In total, though, there's so much information out there, including competing information, including disinformation and misinformation, and inducements to focus elsewhere. That's why, I mean, today, and by design, I mean, this is not an accident. It is to yes, you can find whatever you're looking for, but if you're encouraged to look to not look for certain things, you're not going to look for them. And it's easy to miss something. It's easy to we all get a lot of emails. I just missed one this morning that I needed to have seen a couple of days ago. And that's not by design. It's just by the sheer mass of emails that I get, that we all get. And I think all of us at some point miss something. Imagine that. So if you take that logic and weaponize it, so to speak, and put and then imagine someone sending any of us an additional billion emails a day that don't go to our spam but go into our inbox. And they could say anything. They could be filled with great information. They could be filled with misinformation. They could be filled with disinformation. They could be filled with invitations to tickets to a show, to go on a cruise, to go shopping. The odds that we're missing an important email in that context goes up even more. So you could still say, yeah, there's so many more emails you could for Jared for you to sift through, but that's the point. We were joking today on our platform's morning show that just in terms of adult media content, as I mean, not to sound like the old guy, but as a child, it was relatively speaking, it took great effort to see any amount of nudity. And we were joking about it, but I can't imagine being a teenager today with access to all of everything on the phone, to full-fledged adult content anywhere you want, any time of day, I mean, with endless amounts of in terms of in-person privacy, not in terms of digital, privacy. There's no such thing. So I mean, the idea that kids are out here doing anything, I mean, by but watching that is fascinating to me. Like that they actually go to school and go to other. I mean, I can't imagine. So I feel sorry for them, and we've done nothing to help that as a generation. So I'm just saying that there's so much there to compete for our attention on appropriate topics, and then beyond that compete for our attention with the appropriate understanding or interpretation or frame of those topics.
And briefly, before we get some into your book, I wanted to mention the Cornel West run, which is something we haven't talked about a lot on the forum. I've kind of kept my stuff to the side because I'm interviewing presidential candidates, and I'm not trying to choose anyone. I'm trying to be impartial for the purposes of the forum, but I obviously have views about Cornel West. But I'm curious, what is the whole idea from the Green Party to the independent run? Because before that, Cornel West was under the People's Party banner. What do you kind of make of all this, all these changes all of a sudden?
I just think I just, from my outside perspective, I don't have any particular insight on this, but I just get the impression that the campaign, his run has never been properly thought through and organized. And as former Green Party vice presidential nominee Ajamu Baraka has pointed out recently, he thinks, and I'm interested in this argument, that Cornel West just took himself out of the potential in a very interesting historical moment where he could have actually won the actual presidency. That, and I can't do Baraka's argument justice, but just simply put, just that he sees a lane had been opening up for West to get through given his popularity, his notoriety, his mainstream media access, his populist message, the horrific nature of a Biden candidacy, the worst version of a Trump or whoever else, the Republican. Yeah. So that he thought that enough votes might have been siphoned off in a variety of different ways. Boom. In some way, maybe not, I don't know to what extent I agree fully with that likelihood, but that to the extent that Baraka is arguing that West took himself out of a meaningful political effort, not just in terms of winning, but in terms of having an impact on the electorate, I think he's probably right there. So, but I just think West hadn't really thought it through, and I'm not sure he ever thought. I don't get the impression he ever considered winning, and then I now get the impression that there's some thought that this is a better way for him to win, but he just took himself away from at least 20, 25 or whatever ballots that the Green Party had access to. So he's definitely not going to make that up in a year. I don't know I can't imagine he's got access to that much money, but I don't know. But that said, this is again why I keep advocating that Black people and any number of us on the so-called actual left, we really need to think differently about how we engage electoral politics. And I think we need to start building our own party, or at least our own what's the word I'm looking for? But our own our own entity
entities
that would engage. That's not the word I'm looking for, but just so I don't entirely crash our discussion here. That an entity that is organized for electoral politics specifically, and to raise certain candidates' platforms bright lines of political engagement, et cetera. In other words, to change the way we engage, and it just can't keep being lesser of evil, next Democrat. If I just think we're too defensive, we're not proactive enough, and yet we engage electoral politics to a certain extent, even if it's just to cast a vote here or there, or a protest vote or whatever. I just think I'd like to see us try some sort of more militantly organized electoral effort that would prevent confusion like this from occurring, or would have a more meaningful response to efforts like this.
Yes, and I try to be the shadow when it comes to the social media stuff. I try to focus more on my content and just reading books, and but I'm not gonna lie and say that I don't pay attention to certain things. And the hire Peter Dow was like, that was kind of a scary thing when I saw that. I'm like, why would you hire someone like that, part of the Williamson campaign? And then Baraka makes an excellent point. We know that the Green Party is already an established party. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of power, I guess, in the midst of things, but you also have the idea of ballot access. I think there's already like 20, 25 states of ballot access. And so he's basically starting back from square one again, running as an independent. Because we have independents on here and they tell us how hard it is to get on a ballot as an independent, because you don't have all the public funding like the Democrats and the Republicans do. So you have to get everything on your own. And I don't know. I hope it's not going to end up being a novelty campaign, because I have a lot of respect for Dr. Cornel West. I think he has great ideas, but maybe it has something to do with not being in the political machine a long time either. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know, but
Well, I mean, he's never been a meaningful participant in electoral
mhm.
politics, so I don't expect that he would have it all figured out, at least initially. But I think I just don't get the impression it was thought out fully, and they're sort of still figuring it out as they go. And I just don't agree with this step. But
Mhm. But yeah, I wanted to slip that in. I appreciate your perspective on that. Yeah, for sure, because I think I heard a little bit when you talked to Ashamu Baraka. Um, Getting into the book, you made some slight changes in the second edition. I noticed that there's a Cryptoganda chapter, which I thought was interesting. Um, there was also the reception of the first book that I want to kind of get your view on, and explain to the audience. What was the reception of the first edition of the Myth and Propaganda of Black Power and Power?
so I will continue to say that unfortunately there has been no, to my knowledge, I don't think there has been any uh academic review or sort of academically styled critique of the book. So there has been a good amount of praise and support. There's been, I think, an expected amount of uh, positive response and attempts by people doing good political work uh, to make use of the arguments in the book. Uh, I think there's also been some confused. I have to sometimes speculate because the criticism I've received of the book doesn't come in any organized, again, academic or even journalistic form. So and some of it is more personal. But as the argument goes, I'll just for the sake of time stop by saying I'm not aware of any substantive criticism that addresses itself to the actual arguments in the book. Uh, the 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 most meaningful critique of the book is around my arguments for a solution, which many find for them insufficient, but I would argue is also not the goal or the point of the book, which is to point out a problem that prevents us from getting to a solution. And I don't think I need to provide the answer, so to speak, for my argument to be taken seriously or to be shown as it is to be correct. So, but so somewhere in there, so that's yeah. So usually the criticism I get is in some sort of YouTube commentary or sort of passing verbal comment at an event somewhere, but almost always around problems with what I argue is a solution, and with what often they think I am saying or misunderstanding about what I'm saying, but it's again never. I'm not aware of anywhere where somebody said, "Here's what Jared is saying, here's where he's right or wrong, and here's why." So there has also been some willful omission. And again, I cannot prove this, but I do know from personal experience and off the record conversation that there has been just and just through what appears to be obvious willful omission, not a willingness to engage in the work. And I think that has to do with some of the arguments in the book. But so there is that too, and it's unfortunate, but it's on some level understandable, but it's also on some level also unprincipled.
And I'm just curious, you don't have an economics background, do you?
No. And by the way, the subtitle is not Media, Race, and Economics. That's the way Paul Grave, it's in the Media, Race, and Economics section of Paul Grave, Macmillan, Springer publication. So I know it sometimes looks
Okay.
like that, but that's not actually part of
That's
the,
what caught me off guard. Yeah, I saw that
yeah.
because it's so put up in front center.
So no, but I don't have a background in economics, and that's why most of the argument in the book is comes in areas of field and discipline that I'm both degreed in and professionally involved in, which is Africana studies and media studies. So that's why propaganda is in the title of the book, and that's why at the beginning of the book, or I think on several occasions of the book, I make the point that it's more about propaganda than it is economics. By the way, that's also why I reached out to people like Derek Hamilton, Marisa Baradaran, whose background is law and not economics also, but whose work is prominently known to be in economics, to people like, I mean, everybody from conservatives who ignored me, like Glenn Lowry, to economics professors who are no longer here, unfortunately, but at the time also basically agreed with my argument, but didn't really engage, like Professor William Spriggs at Howard University. In other words, I've attempted to engage. I've interviewed Dean Baker, the economist. So I've engaged and been wanting response and engagement from anybody. So, and if there's an economist who reads my work and thinks that I and Derek Hamilton and others are wrong, I'm happy to hear that, and just let me know. But that's why in the book includes reference to a debate I had with the CEO of Industrial Bank, the black bank based here or down the road from here in Washington, D.C. So who I think exposed himself as having no idea of how the economy works, which is striking given he's the head of a bank, or maybe that's why he's the head of a bank. But so in other words, I get it. I understand where the limitations of what my professional so-called expertise is, and that's why I've published through a peer review, albeit I guess it would be because a second tier press. It's not a university press, but it has peer review, and why I've happily welcomed and put the work out there in one form or another, even before the book, for more than a decade. So And again, and I'm being literal here, I'm not aware of any. So as far as I'm aware, there is not one substantive argument that is, again, where someone has gone to print and organized an argument that lays out what's wrong with what they think I've done. I'm not talking about, again, YouTube comments or what people say in passing that is, or in some sort of argument at a conference or at an event. Because again, those arguments are usually based in something that they think that I've said that I haven't, or is based in some misunderstanding of the argument, because they're not basing their critique in engagement with my work. So that's why. So I feel like I'm rambling here, but I just want to be clear that I welcome it, and it hasn't happened. And I think it's because I'm right, and I just think the political ramifications of the accuracy of the argument is why people have to not engage at all, rather than try to engage in a meaningful way and demonstrate where I've got something wrong.
In what ways do you think um, does the rise of Deion Sanders, and this is another crazy, is all these pop culture references that you make, and just for people to know, go back to episode 9. We're not going to go back into like Black Buying Power, what it is, and all that stuff, because we've already talked about that. But I think it's interesting because you use Jay-Z as like a prime example, and Beyonce, about how they make these comments, perpetuating the myth, saying, if Black people stop spending their money in strip clubs, start spending their money on marijuana and everything else, you will be able to have money like everybody else. And you completely debunk all this. But it's like a generational sort of, just like over and over, just a recycling of the same talking points. But I'm curious, where do you see the intersection between this vested interest in Deion Sanders being a coach at the University of Colorado, and this whole idea of the myth of Black buying power? Do you see an intersection between those two?
Well, the way I saw it, I did. I didn't deal with this in the book, but I did update some of the Jay-Z stuff in the second edition, because since the first edition added on to the badness of his defense of Black capitalism. But look, I'm not that different from anybody else. I enjoy seeing people like Deion verbally spar with journalists and make people uncomfortable with his braggadocious Blackness and his really incomparable skill on the field. I mean, I hope people don't forget what a rare and special talent he was in both football and baseball. Unfortunately, I feel like some of that gets lost in everything else over the years, but he was remarkable. But the parallel that I saw, first of all, is that he goes to an HBCU, and I have been teaching at one for almost 20 years, and misrepresents the political economy as it relates to HBCUs, their role in the economy, what is their potential to produce high-level academic or athletic products, so to speak. And then he targets initially the Black community, much like the myth of buying power, and says Black graduates don't give back to the university enough. The university doesn't invest enough in the program. Black universities haven't united, and much like the mythology of circulating the Black dollar, he made the argument that HBCUs haven't united and pooled their resources to make themselves more. And at one point he made some reference to selling ad time and getting their games televised. And I remember pointing out that Morgan State, where I teach in Baltimore, has a 10,000 seat arena. There is not one major advertiser that's going to pay one major penny for a game in a stadium that seats only 10,000 people. So that alone takes you out of the running when you're talking about 80 to 110, 20,000 people piled up in these major white stadiums. They're not. So the idea, and then Morgan physically, geographically couldn't scale up a stadium to be that big if it wanted to without wiping out half of its campus. So what, but instead of talking honestly about the relationship that Black people have to the economy, he makes this fantasy claim that uh, that trashes Black people and nominally Black institutions. That's another fantasy, what an HBCU is in the first place. Calling them Black institutions is a complete misnomer. And I should even be ashamed that I even slipped to say as much as I did in the second ago. There's not at all Black institutions in the way that Black people often are encouraged to think of them as Black. But he dogs them as being the problem here. And then, of course, as all Black capitalists do, the big payday comes from a more major white venture capital infusion, or in this case, the buyout by Colorado. And and then all of the conversation around Blackness and HBCUs goes away. This nonsense about him turning Colorado into an HBCU is memed so that Black people and supporters of Deion can feel better. And meanwhile, no HBCU benefits, no Black community benefits, only a handful of Black players at most benefit. And who benefits the most? Colorado University, their supporters, boosters, and beyond that, white America capital, et cetera, so on and so on and so on and so on. So that's what was the parallel and the frustration for me. It's another version of how the mythology around buying power and Black economics works in this country. So and what I did update in the second edition is when I make reference to Black economists, going back to who have been saying for 100 years, and I'm literally referencing the almost the centennial anniversary of Abram Harris's argument of 100 years ago, that buying power, banking Black, circulating dollars, Black businesses is not a solution. In fact, he says Black capitalists, Black businesses, Black business owners are, he goes beyond even what I argue. He said they're the biggest abusers of the Black community.
Wow.
So they don't get to be heard. Never mind me. The economists in that argument that again has been being made for 100 years gets erased under this mythology and the propaganda and the messaging and the narratives that people like Deion and others carry into the public sphere. And when any of us try to raise a critical hand to say, hey, we are immediately met with the mythology that Harris and others have been talking about for 100 years. Oh, come on, you can't be critical of Black people trying to do something. You can't be critical. You got to support the Black business. You got to support the. And meanwhile, even the phrase, and I'll stop here, but the phrase conscious consumer is a concoction of the Nielsen Group meant to target this understood by marketers, because they've been studying it and manipulating it for a long time, desire among Black people for overt, even nominal and symbolic reference to our struggle in our community. So Nielsen says, put some red, black, and green in your store, put some African cloth in your store, put some kente cloth and some Kwanzaa references in your store, whether it's Black owned or not. Nielsen argues that the Black conscious consumer is good with that alone. So
yeah, you said a lot there. I'll tell you that much. But I just wanted to ask you, do you have time for one more question?
Sure, yeah.
Because it does pertain to the book, this Cryptoganda. Now, is that something that you coined yourself? I thought it was so cool when I read that, because I was trying to compare the editions. I was like, okay, what did he add in there? And then I was like, okay, that's different. And then you also added the McKinsey and Company piece. You added some other stuff in there too, reworded some things around. But what is Cryptoganda? Did you coin that? And how does that pertain to the myth?
Yeah, as far as I know, I did coin it, and it's really just me being slick. It's not that deep. It's just me, and as I say in the book, it's just applying the buying power argument to the specific cryptocurrency blockchain world or universe. And my point in that chapter is just to show that one of the biggest reasons that Black people by per capita of investors were some of the biggest investors in cryptocurrency and some of the biggest losers in the collapse is that there is this media ecosphere that has evolved of Black capitalist, Black business influencers and podcasters who have taken up the slack, as I argue in the chapter, of what can't be accomplished by those initial national commercials with Matt Damon and LeBron James that were targeting the national audience. What makes those more effective, particularly the LeBron James one targeting Black people, is this underneath and evolving podcast media environment of very popular platforms that are giving new wrapping and new branding to very old arguments around, hey, just invest and get your money right. And so there are many fantasies that are attached to cryptocurrency and blockchain. Many, the ones that are targeted to Black people, are that they are going to solve historic crimes. Spike Lee's commercial literally said it was a revolution. Hill Harper, who's now running for Senate, was running around telling everybody that if Black people buy up all the Satoshis, which is what is it, 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin, something like that, that when Bitcoin becomes the dominant currency of the world, everyone's going to have to come through us, and we'll be in power. I mean, it's just all this nonsense that has. And you talk about when you raise and I think it's, and I don't mean, and I'm not suggesting you meant to do this critically, but it's a very important question to ask. What are my credentials? So when people ask, is Dr. Ball an economist? No, but neither is Hill Harper.
No, right.
Neither are the fellas on Earn Your Liberation. That's our show. On Earn Your Leisure.
Yeah.
Neither is Ian Dunlap. Neither is Steve Harvey.
Roland Martin, all these people.
Roland Martin. None of these people are economists, and yet all of them participate in promoting these economic mythologies. And yet, when the critic enters a space, now all of a sudden you want to see the credentials. Now all of a sudden you want to, and then so that's what I'm happy. Here's the book. Here are all the footnotes. Here's everything you would need to tear my argument to pieces. Please, as I tell my students, I dare you not to take my word for it. I double dare you to check the work. Anywhere, I will be anywhere. If you want the debate, if you don't want my presence and you just want to show the work to be flawed, do it. Publish it. Put it on a blog. Tag me.
So you're like open to all the criticism. And I love that about you. Like, you're very
transparent.
And but so many people aren't principled like that. You don't have anything to hide. You're just upfront about it. And I tell you something, I was thinking about you because the conclusion of our first interview was about this African descendants of slavery versus the solidarity of dispersed Africans, SODA. And you explained that to me. I was like, oh gosh, SODA, I didn't think about it like that before. That's so cool. And you said you didn't coin that, one of your comrades did.
Yeah, but I didn't think of it either. I didn't think of it either. My buddy had to come up with that one. No, he had I'm taking that from my and the only reason I don't say his name is because he doesn't want it. He doesn't want the credit.
That's all good.
I'd have been long giving him the credit for it. So I just have to settle with no. I didn't come up with it.
But the point I was making is that you said this about how some people made their entire political career on this one issue of reparations, reparative justice. And I think it's odd I've reached out to probably 300 different guests in this short time of like 15 months that I started doing this, because I'm a professor by trade. I'm currently not teaching right now, but that's my background. Like that, I've been a teacher most of my life. And it's crazy how I can't get one person that represents these ADOS movements. One person now, I reached out to Tone Talks, Antonia Moore, Camilla Moore. I've reached out to Sandy Darity. I've reached out to so many people. You can't
Well, they
imagine.
broke with him.
What's that?
They cut him off. So he might, maybe that's why he's not interested.
Who is
ADOS
that?
apparently, if ADOS, as far as I'm aware, I'm not up to date. I haven't paid attention in a minute. But last I was aware, they had cut themselves off from him.
From Darity?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but
So they
what I
used
was
to
going to say is
champion him.
what I was going to say
Mm-hmm.
is that he actually agreed to do the interview with me. We had already set the date and everything, and he pulled out and said, "You know, Kiko," and it to me it was an insult, because I mean we're both Black people, both PhDs, and he's telling me like he wants to inform and educate the people, but yet he wanted me to push, basically sell 25 books, buy them up front. I'm like, it's not enough for me just to buy the book myself up front, because I've never had a guest out of the 300
Wait a
people I
minute.
reached out to. He expected me to fund 25 books for him to come onto my platform. And I can only think it's because they know that I'm not going to just promote all the talking points and stuff. I'm going to be critical of them and stuff. But I still, even thinking now, I'm like, are you really in to help people, or are you just in to sell books and make money? Like, and to me, I can only come to one conclusion. But I lose a lot of respect for people like that, because even people who didn't accept the invitations at least responded and gave their reasons. But this guy was like, yes, I'm going to do it. And do you want Kirsten to come on with me? And then pulls out and says that after we had already basically said we're going to do it. I just think it's crazy, these preconditions. You wanted to educate Black people. This is such an important issue to you, but yet a small independent platform like this, to me, would be a great opportunity to promote your book to a wider audience. But I guess people have their own
He
agendas.
said he would not come on unless you bought 25 copies
That's
in
exactly
advance.
what he said. I got the email saved to this day, and I've used it as almost an inspiration to just like, I know I'm in this for the right reasons. Like I don't need any of that. It's just ridiculous to me,
Are
because
you
I've
going
had
to
all
edit this
kinds of
part
responses.
out, or is this going to be part of the? Is this meant to be off the record?
No, this everything I do is on record. I don't hide away.
No, I just want to check because I'm definitely going to be mentioning this. I'm definitely going to make
Yes,
reference.
definitely. Please
So I
do.
just want to make sure because that is, hey, I keep wanting to say I'm shocked, but I mean, I keep, or I shouldn't be shocked.
And
But
I'll
that is
take the
still, I am still shocked by it. That is so,
exact
that's
verbiage.
trifling. That is
Can you meet? He
unexcusable,
said, "I'll do
shameful.
it, Professor Scruggs, Doctor Scruggs, but you need to meet this precondition. Like, can you meet this precondition?" And then he said later, once your podcast grows or whatever, like I might come on then, once you get like a lot of, support. And then I told him, no, thank you. I don't want you basically on at that point. Like, if that's the reason, I have everything saved. I have all the receipts.
That's inexcusable and
Hmm.
shameful. I don't know what else to say. I can't imagine.
But
I
I'm
just
glad
can't
that I brought
imagine it.
this up just based on your reaction alone, because I mean, I think I had mentioned it one time in passing before the previous audiences, because I didn't want to make a big deal about it. But to me, it must be a big deal, because I
To
it
me,
it
it's a
almost
big
gave me
deal.
it made me lose hope in this issue in a way. I'm like, if the main people who are supposed to be pushing this movement are not even wanting to come on a platform like this, what does that say?
I don't know. I don't know what to say. I think it's again that again. I've never taken. In any of the years that I've been involved with what I consider to be meaningful grassroots activism, reparations has never been the primary issue. And one of the main concerns has always been that it focuses on getting rewarded from a system that maintains its abuse and exploitation of Black, African, and other people around the world. So the best way for there to be reparations is, as always, I've understood, to have an actual revolutionized society, to have a different world. Uh, and then I've had my tactical, and Darity and I have had exchanges about this ourselves. So I don't, but and I say that to say that I find it to be that if the concern is, to your point, spreading a message, activism, organizing, the idea that you would tell anyone, I'm not going to come on your platform because it's too small, or I'm not going to come on your platform because it's too small, and you're not going to buy in advance 25 copies of my book. To me, I admit I just see an overlap in why reparations would for him become an issue, because that's not a principled approach to organizing, and reparations as a main topic of focus for political struggle is, for me, less principled than trying to create an actual liberated society, not one that just pays a debt that it really can never fully pay, but maintains its exploitative and horrifically hostile colonizing nature. I don't think I was being very clear there, because this is being newly dropped on me. I'm gonna work this out, but I do say
you're fine.
that
No,
is, I just want to be
I'm a
clear.
little so I'm
That's
a
just trifling. So let me just end on that.
and honestly,
It's trifling.
the goal wasn't for me. His book is amazing, by the way. His book and Kirsten Mullen's book, and I promoted it a few times to show that I don't have any ill will. I just don't understand, as someone who's trying to search for things and present these topics to new audiences. I mean, a third of my listenership and viewership is outside of the country, so this would be a great opportunity to embrace different audiences, and sort of bring this issue to like a broader spectrum. But I just see it more as a missed opportunity, more so than anything. I wasn't insulted that's what came out of his mouth. I was more shocked than anything, and I was a little hurt because I'm like, okay, what exactly is going on, in academia, and it's kind of set my mind, and that's why I got one foot in and one foot out of academia, because a lot of the people in academia, I understand that the pay is not the greatest sometimes, and then you have these people like the Robert DeAngelos, they get all this money at these speaking engagements, and it's clearly like a hustle. You can go to these universities and they pay you so much money up front, but it's like, to me, I lose a lot of respect for that kind of approach too. But I can't tell people what to do with their money and and their agendas and stuff. But I just want to ask you if you have any final words of encouragement or any final plugs for my audience. And we want to thank you again for this episode 73 and coming back onto the show, Dr. Ball.
No, it's been an honor, and thank you. And people can find me at I Mix What I Like, imixwhatilike.org. And more importantly, I hope they find us at blackpowermedia.org and at Black Power Media on YouTube. We have an increasing platform, a lot of different shows, and so I would love for people to interact more with that as well. And again, thank you. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. And thanks for having me on. And no, I did not charge you 25 copies of my book for this interview.
No, I bought the book just straight up. And I'm just like, gosh, that's not good enough for you. I can't buy your book and discuss the book. You got to get something else out of me. This is ridiculous. But you can go on NBC and ABC and all these other organizations and networks and talk your stuff. But anyway, have a great day, Dr. Ball. Beautiful people. We will talk soon, and enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.
Likewise, peace.